Sorry, this is part 2. I had to blow my nose and cough, and I hit the wrong button. I didn't pause it. I stopped it. So you'll get 2 videos for this week. Okay, so if we're calming down everybody and we're saying, look, everybody knows you're going to get the house, not him. Everybody knows that he's not marrying me for my stuff. It calms everybody down. Another situation where we will use a premarital agreement is if somebody has a family business. And there are lots of family businesses out there, right? And let's say that wife is marrying somebody and the whole family is involved in a family business. What are you going to do? If the marriage terminates, is the spouse going to be able to still have an ownership interest in the family business? Because if the marriage terminates, that's what happens. The spouse would get a portion of the family business spouse's interest in the property or in the business. So that makes people nervous in family businesses. And so a premarital agreement puts everybody at ease. And it makes life so much easier once you're married. People aren't looking at you sideways at family gatherings like, he's just here because he wants the money. Or she's just here because she wants to have part of the family business. Okay? So you want to make sure that that everybody is comfortable with the marriage, because that old saying that you marry a family is true. It is true, especially if everybody works together in a family business. Guess what? You are really married to them. You're going to see them every day. So those are the 2 real instances in non-community property states that you want to have a premarital agreement. One thing you can do when you are putting these things together so that everybody's interests are balanced is put a sunset clause in these that says if we're married for 10 years, this premarital agreement goes away. And usually it is 10 years because the divorce rate goes down significantly after 10 years of marriage. So you want to make sure that everybody knows, hey, after 10 years, this is a forever thing. We don't want to hear anything from you, family. And it lets the spouse who is being asked to sign the agreement, lets them know, this isn't going to be hanging over my head forever. Okay? So those sunset clauses are important. Okay? Now, there are some legal requirements to make a premarital agreement valid. Now, before we go over those, I want you to just think for a minute. What do you need for a valid contract? Because that's what this is. It's a contract. You have to have capacity. You have to have no fraud, no duress, and a meeting of the minds. Okay? That's what the court's looking for. So, okay, you've got to be competent. Well, you probably wouldn't be getting married if you weren't competent, so usually that one's a gimme. No fraud or duress. These are the biggies. So, when do you tell your soon-to-be wife or husband, hey, honey, I'd like you to sign a premarital agreement? Do you do it like a week before the wedding when everything's paid for and she's got the dress and has had her shower and is going to cry and say, I can't believe you're doing this to me a week before the wedding? That's called duress. That is forcing somebody's hand. But if the parties each have their own lawyer and they talk about it a good length of time before the wedding, and each party's lawyer gets a chance to review the document and make recommendations and negotiate, well, guess what? There's no duress. Doesn't that sound romantic? My lawyer will get a hold of your lawyer and we'll get it all taken care of. Well, guess what? That's what happens. And if you want it to be a valid premarital agreement, those are factors that the court looks at. If the person who wants the premarital agreement says, hey, my lawyer's just doing everything, you don't need to worry about it, just sign it, well, that could be a little fraud. That could be overreaching, and the courts don't like it. Okay? I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Okay. Boy, it's a good thing that we are remote. I wouldn't want to get anybody sick. I'm sneezing and coughing everywhere. So the court is going to look at capacity, fraud. Is everything that you own in this premarital agreement, are you holding something back? Right? I know it sounds weird, but as we get to when we talk about dividing up marital assets and divorce or dissolution, you'd be surprised how many people think that they're so slick they can hide things, like a boat. Or it's usually a guy who's trying to hold on to a four-wheeler, or a boat or something, a piece of hunting land. So you have to make sure that everything is disclosed in the premarital agreement. There can be no fraud. There can be no overreach. Both parties have to have access to counsel to look it over. If any of those things are missing, the court, at the time you decide to terminate your marriage and you bring this contract and you say, this is an easy one, Judge, we got this all worked out before we got married, might look at the premarital agreement and go, I don't think so. Because the judge has the right to rip up the contract. If there are allegations of fraud or duress, the court will say, not a valid contract, let's start at the beginning. And you go through a regular divorce or termination, however you're terminating the marriage. Okay? So it's really important that you do this right. First of all, it's really important you do everything right. Let me just throw that out there. Don't take shortcuts. They always come back to bite you. There's your word of advice from me today. But when you're talking about a contract, really don't cut corners. It would be a shame to go through everything to put together a contract only for it to be thrown out later. Nobody likes surprises. Okay? Now, your book has some examples of premarital agreements that the courts have invalidated. And I've given you an assignment, so make sure you check the module and the discussion to read these little, they're just synopsises of cases, and summarize them for me and tell me what went wrong. Okay? I need to know that you know, or you can recognize, a valid and an invalid contract. And they're very glaring. It's not a difficult assignment. Okay? Your book also has some celebrity premarital agreements. You'll love that. Right? Kardashians with their premarital agreements. Why do they do that? Number one, they're in California. Right? Community property state. You gotta do it there. If you have anything. Now look, if you're in California and you're 18 and your soon-to-be spouse is 18 and you're starting from scratch and nobody owns anything, you don't need a premarital agreement. But if you're in California and you have substantial assets and you're looking to get married, you better have a premarital agreement. Otherwise, if the marriage terminates, the spouse that didn't have all the premarital assets still gets half of. In a community property state, it's 50-50, right down the middle. So, if I'm Khloe Kardashian, which I'm mistaken for all the time, I know it's a curse, but if I were Khloe Kardashian, people would come to me and, if you want to get married, I got to protect everything I've worked for because I've worked really, really, really hard. So, now your book goes into post-marital agreements. Ugh. There really is no such thing. A post-marital agreement is called a separation agreement. Post-marital agreement is when we're already married and your spouse comes up to you and says, what if we were to get divorced? What kind of way would we terminate the marriage? That's a big red flag, and you better go get yourself a lawyer. Okay? So post-nuptial agreements, it's really just a termination of the marriage. Okay? Okay, so that brings us to the end of the chapter. I've assigned to you 3 questions to do in the review of key concepts at the end of the chapter. So please do those. And then also there's another assignment that goes with the cases that are in your book where the court found that the premarital agreements were not valid. Okay? I will post a test probably in a week or so for this chapter. I haven't posted any tests yet because, Becky, I know you're getting up to speed. And I'm not going to put that pressure on you. You've got plenty of assignments to do. So work on those assignments. I'm going to email you so you can tell me when you're ready to take a test on each module. So there will be a test on this chapter, but we're going to hold off on that. I'm going to make sure that you are up to speed in all of your classes. Okay? So if you have any questions, email me. And I hope you have a little bit of fun with this assignment, because the assignment with the premarital agreements that were not valid, actually some of them are kind of funny. Okay? All right, thank you.